says so. I am operating two different computers right now, so you know, oh, there's an alarm going on in my building, fire alarm, but it's fine. No fire. Okay, yeah, it's live now. We are live. So, everyone, welcome to the World of Momos podcast, and we are live with Pete North. And
Hi there.
we like I titled this. Sorry, go on. Did you say something?
Nope, just saying hello.
No, cool. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, like there was a bit of a delay. That's why it's a bit low quality right now. I put it on low quality for that reason because I'm having internet issues. I titled this, which will be on YouTube later, "Lost at Sea," because yeah, Britain is lost at sea. Everyone is lost at sea. So we want to discuss what is the current affairs, current state of affairs right now. Where do we see things going forward? Talk a bit about Tory leadership as well, because a lot of people think that it's not important, but it is important. When you are lost at sea and your ship has so many holes, you need someone to at least plug some of the holes so that we can stay adrift long enough to reach some sort of destination. And then we're also going to touch a bit about how we intend to discuss the manifesto that Pete has written, which I really want to discuss bit by bit. I want to make a series with Pete, so we're going to see like when we can get more time, and then every week we can have a live stream or recorded episode, however is more convenient, to talk about all the bits within the manifesto, because it's important for people to really deep dive into it. So yeah, hi Steve, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
So what do you think? Are we lost at sea?
Yes, is the short answer to that. I think it's certainly from my perspective as a political analyst of the right, I think we're in pretty terrible shape because there doesn't seem to be a vehicle that's forming up that's capable of producing a government that we actually want. Looking at the latest membership polls of the Tory party, it looks like Badenoch's going to win by a comfortable margin,
Yeah.
and she's commanding the membership vote, and she's getting some quite high profile endorsements from a lot of the dead wood, not least Penny Mordaunt and a lot of the people who are afraid
Hmm.
of the party going too far to the right. And she's talking about leading by consensus. So she's not offering up any policy direction. She's not even setting the tone of what the future Tory party is going to be. With Robert Jenrick, you've got a man who has published a number of papers under his own name, um, detailed policy, ambitious, and it's clear that he has understood that if we're going to get the country back on track, then as a starter for 10, you do need to leave the ECHR. You do need to roll back the Human Rights Act. You need to look at all the other strands of international agreements, and you need to bring that governance back in house and take lawmaking ability off the judges, because that's why we can't control immigration. That's why we see all these legal challenges to new energy infrastructure, and that's why it takes forever to get anything built, and why it costs so much in planning. So you need to completely rebuild the state. So Jenrick is telling us that he has understood the issues, not least immigration, that it needs to be substantially down, and essentially the asylum backlog needs to be closed and deported. So that's a very clear signal. Um, and he's very much parking his tanks on Nigel Farage's lawn, and he's actually positioned his version of the Tory party to the right of reform, which, this is why I want him to win, because that then puts the ball in reform's court to actually up their game and actually
Yeah.
come up with some policy, some direction, and some definition, which they've been thus far lacking. Meanwhile, we see a couple of weeks ago that the Reform Party did actually bother to produce a constitution, but it is so unbelievably lightweight. I think it's almost copied and pasted from the Brexit Party. There's basically one paragraph about what it stands for. And even that one paragraph that Britain should be self-governing, that should be the cue to generate a whole load of subsequent policies, or at least a bunch of policy papers, or provide a direction to the party and its activities. But instead, we see it pulling stunts like that legal challenge over the Manchester airport attack. These are all
Stunts,
headline
these
grabbing.
political stunts. Yeah.
They grab the headlines for 2 days, and then it's all forgotten, swept under the rug. Nobody, and unless it comes to the fore again, people will forget it ever happened. So this is not how you build a movement. So, I've been quite impressed with Jenrick, but I just don't think he's going to win. He hasn't got the he hasn't got the
They aren't.
presence.
Yeah, there aren't enough conservatives in the Conservative Party, are there? So.
Well, this is the thing. You've got a party that is looking at the contenders, going, okay, which one of these is most likely to win an election? And from the starting point we're at, they're probably not wrong in thinking that, Badenoch's the one that can depose Labour and win an election. And I'm saying, that's fine, but what's the point? Because if you're not going to take on board all of these challenges, if you're not going to rebuild the state, if you're not going to go to war on the blob, then it's more of the same. So we have two dysfunctional factions of the Tory party, and then say, for example, Jenrick did win. I don't know if he realizes the significance of what he's saying. Because he's saying, I'm going to pull out of the ECHR and pull out and do all of these things. He is going to war on the establishment. He's going to war on the media. He's going to be picking fights with Brussels and Belfast and Dublin, because all of these things are interconnected. And the thing is, you can't just say, I'm going to do these things. These are all deeply interwoven international agreements, part of the international rules-based order. And if you actually want to have that reset, you've got to go all of the way. And once you start pulling on any of those threads, the whole thing starts unraveling, and you've got to be prepared to keep unraveling and unraveling until you've got the whole thing, because you can't leave it undone. So what he is proposing, if he realizes it or not, he's proposing a factory reset to 1997. And what he's going to need is a whole raft of ideas and policies as to what replaces the Blair human rights regime and all this international governance. And I don't know if he realizes the extent to which that's going to unravel Northern Ireland, or at least it's going to cause problems with the protocol. But of course, there's the next question: is the common travel area, which, given if you've been paying attention to Irish politics and the current regime, they've basically got an open borders policy to sub-Saharan Africans, and it's causing serious disturbances. And if we are going to get a grip on immigration, then that back door is going to have to be closed. So we are going to have to, I actually think, dump the entire Northern Ireland Protocol, which means you've got Jenrick's going to be going up against the Brussels machinery and all of the Remainer cohort, who are absolutely convinced that that this will erupt in violence. So you then have to look at you have to settle the issue. So we possibly do need to look at a referendum on Irish reunification. or at least a referendum on the protocol, and whether a separate residual human rights regime is going to have to remain in Northern Ireland to underpin the Good Friday Agreement. But my view is Good Friday Agreement is now quite old. It's obsolete. It's not working. Same
Hmm.
as the protocol's not working. I actually think the whole issue needs a reset. It needs a new treaty, a modernization treaty, in conjunction with whatever reforms we're making to sort of solidify and move forward on Brexit. Because what he's talking about is effectively finishing the job of Brexit. Brexit always did
Yeah.
imply national sovereignty, supremacy of parliament. And whilst we're still embedded in the human rights apparatus, we are not a self-governing country. And this is what I'm working on at the moment. I'm working on a paper on the case for leaving the ECHR, which is a kind of follow-up to the manifesto I've just finished. That's slow going because it's a hell of a lot more complicated. Because
Hmm.
we were signatories to the ECHR, same as everybody else, but we went one further and we actually ported it all into British law with the Human Rights Act. And that has various interactions with things like the Aarhus Convention, which speeds up environmental cases being brought under the guise of human rights. And we saw this playing out when some Swiss pensioners took the Switzerland government to court, saying that they weren't doing enough on climate. So now that this is ported into law, you can't just leave the ECHR. You have to leave the Human Rights Act. But you also need to have an idea of what you're going to replace it with. And this is the problem, because you've got a lot of lazy thinkers on the right who just think, oh, just revert it back to how it was in 1997. Well, a lot of things have changed since 1997. A lot of public attitudes towards things like human rights have changed. The British Constitution itself has changed. So are you talking about rolling back the Supreme Court and restoring the law lords? And if so, there's a lot of constitutional traditionalists, the sort of Starkites, who would like to see that. But actually, we're dealing with a new generation who look at the House of the Lords and think, well, this is a weird abstract. Why have we got unelected hereditary peers and bishops, and why isn't it an elected upper chamber? Now, I was one of the traditionalists, but the thing is, there's no question about it that the Lords does need reform, and the arguments for retaining hereditary peers, well, look, we already have a hereditary system in the Labour Party with all the nepotism going
Hmm.
on, and
Yeah.
to say that Stephen Kinnock is an improvement on his father, I don't think so. So the argument for tradition in hereditary setups doesn't hold. But this links in with wider reforms that I think are something we need to start a discussion about, because Labour has come in saying we need to address things like hereditary peers and removing the bishops and reforming the House of Lords. And that's quite a popular point of view, even among people on the right. But my view is you either keep all of it or you keep none of it. And if we're starting to eat away at these redundant and obsolete concepts, then we do need to say, why are we still a member of the Commonwealth? And if you're saying, well, let's get rid of that because it's, this soft power instrument, it's just a stick to beat us with for reparations. It's not valuable in terms of trade. It isn't a customs union. It isn't a regulatory union. um, do any of the soft power cultural exchanges that happen under a Commonwealth aegis? Can we do that some other way? Does it add value? What value does it add to the average working class British person? Um, I couldn't tell you. And so, if you're talking about doing away with that, sort of taking the church out of politics in the Lords, perhaps an elected upper chamber, getting rid of the Commonwealth, then yeah, it's actually really time that we need to ask questions about the monarchy. I mean, we all loved Queen Elizabeth, the grand old lady,
Mhm.
served the country with distinction. But you look at the smouldering wreckage of the royal family now, which is the spoiled Harry Windsor, um, uh, this and Prince Charles, or the King. I'm never going to get used to calling that man the King. He is as
Yeah.
much your establishment, deep state, liberal lefty as anybody else. And you see this mentality with the recent scandal of the Chagos Islands. You've got this institutionalized post-colonial guilt that is not only embedded in the upper echelons of the civil service, it's also in the Labour Party, but it's also in the monarchy itself. And so you've got all of the main apparatus that are supposed to defend us and promote the national interest that are actually actively undermining us. And this is why, this is one of the reasons
Hmm.
I've come out strongly against Badenoch, because there's a sort of underlying attitude among our political elites that number 10 is this sort of branch of the UN where where we now
Hmm.
take it in turns to have foreigners as our ambassadors, as our politicians, and now our prime minister. Now, I don't think it's racist or controversial to say that the British Prime Minister should be meaningfully British. But this is a woman who was born to Nigerian parents, entirely opportunistically came to Britain just to get the piece of paper, buggered off back to Nigeria, and then was educated in Nigeria, as raised as a Nigerian, and then went on to study in the United States. This is a woman who doesn't know us.
Yeah.
She does not know who we are. She does not know what makes us tick. She is not, in any sense, British. And people say, oh, well, you're just racist. But this isn't a race thing. Had she been born in Britain, raised in Britain, experienced the British cultural zeitgeist of the 80s and 90s, as I did,
Hmm.
and understood what it was like to go to a British school, to know what was on the television at the time. You know, basic things that you can have
Hmm.
small talk with ordinary people. And then she's saying, "Oh well, I became working class when I worked at McDonald's." This woman has absolutely
Yeah.
no
She
concept
doesn't understand that. Yeah.
of what it
Yeah.
means to
and
be
and, and
British.
that's this is the but this is the thing, like what I was saying, like why is important, the Tory leadership is important, why people are not understanding. It's not because all of a sudden like I'm supporting Tories or anything like that. There's a lot of signals that it gives out. The thing is that it pushes reform and any other upstart party to actually, on the political right, to actually start being politically right, to actually start being conservative. Because if the established party that they're fighting against is being more conservative than the upstart parties, then there won't be any reason for those parties, right? So it pushes them to actually be serious about it. The other thing as well is that Robert Jenrick, as the leader of the Tory party, is very important to weed out these facts as well of Cami Badenoch and all of those people like her, who are actually not embedded into the British culture and are not really conservative. They're only conservative in certain areas when it fits them. And they only put out, like, statements and stuff. They don't feel like they need an intellectual base or policy work or anything, or actually have some merit behind them. and this idea that you have to be ethnic minority to deal with immigration. I don't agree with that as well.
Mm,
And I
mm.
also don't agree that Kemi Badenoch, as the leader of Tory party, will actually win the elections. She won't win the elections. What will happen is there will be even less voter turnout, and Labour will win because of it,
I
because
think
their
you're right.
people
I
will
think
come
that's a
and
distinct
vote.
possibility. Yeah,
Yeah.
because she's not universally popular, and despite what
Hmm.
the sort of metropolitan London bubble seems to think, I
Yeah.
actually don't. I think the average working class Tory voter will say they won't say it. They might not even think it,
Hmm.
but instinctively they're
Yeah.
not going to vote for a Nigerian prime minister. And
Yeah.
they saw what happened with Rishi Sunak ducking out of D-Day
Hmm.
commemorations. It underscores why this stuff matters. And so it's not because she's got brown skin that I won't vote Tory. I'd vote for you in a heartbeat, you know.
Yeah.
But it's because
She
she's,
doesn't connect.
yeah,
Yeah.
she. So you know, this is uh, it, this is just a fundamental problem with
And
conservatism.
you know, like it's as much is as much as Keir Starmer not connecting, right? So it's not really about skin color. It is about non-connection, right? Keir Starmer, being British, is still not connecting with people, and
Yeah,
that's the thing
yeah,
as well. Like these people don't understand. Robert Jenrick is not just saying things. People can know that there's more to this guy beyond it, and it doesn't even matter if he does anything or not, right? It doesn't even matter if the Tory apparatus doesn't let him do anything. It's just that he makes it possible while he's already saying those things, trying to be a candidate. He's already making it possible in the mainstream to be able to say those things. When a
yes,
mainstream party candidate is able to say things like Chris Kaba is a criminal and we should not be congratulating or trying to raise charity for this guy, that we should about Peter Lynch as well, all these things, when he's coming out stronger than Farage about these things, he makes the conversation possible. And when he's
yes.
saying he wants to deport all the illegals and stuff, it just makes the conversation possible. You can have them now.
Yeah, it's moving the Overton window to the right. But
Hmm.
the other problem, of course, is there's a huge um, cohort of the Conservative Party who do not know what conservatism means, and I really
Hmm.
believe Badenoch is one of them. You get a
Yeah.
lot of these younger types who are coming to politics and believing themselves of the right because they are anti-woke. Now, you that's not the basis of a movement. That's just opposition. It's
Hmm.
it's just opposition to a encroaching American philosophy that's been
Hmm.
championed by the British left and adopted wholesale by the establishment. Now, you can fight against that as Badenoch does, but that does not necessarily make you right wing, and it doesn't necessarily make you conservative, because there's a lot of middle of the road, turfy liberal women who are implacably opposed to all this wokery, but they themselves are not conservative or right wing. J.K. Rowling being one of them.
Yeah.
If she
Yeah.
wasn't currently absorbed with fighting gender ideology, and this wasn't a thing, she would be throwing money at refugee charities and rolling out the red carpet for illegal
She
immigrants or
probably
whatever.
already is. She
She's
probably
already
already is.
having given a
One
million
second, Pete. Like
pounds to the Labour Party.
someone has said your microphone is too low. They can't hear you.
Right, is that, well, I've turned it up a little bit, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, hopefully that's better. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she probably already is and not telling anyone about it anyways. Like, and people like them are like, lefties are going to be lefties, right? You can't take that out of them. They're not conservatives. So, and with if within the Conservative Party, the reason why I want Kemi Badenoch to lose, it's not because I hate her as a person or anything like that. I just don't think so she's a conservative. I think so she's a
Mm,
liberal Democrat, like a lot of the people within the Conservative Party. And it's not about like this short termism. It's like, oh, she will win 2029. That's
Well,
what
who
will
cares?
you do with that win?
Yeah,
Who cares? I don't even want Robert Jendrik to win 2029 if possible. Think about 2034. So, like, think long term, like, build something, get these liberals out of the party, build a proper conservative core, and then go for it. Then what he's saying will happen, not now, in 10, 15 years, but you first have to gut these liberals out.
yeah.
She won't do it.
Well, this is Genric's problem, is that he is so definitive in what he's seeking to achieve, and comprehensive in terms of his policy, that he's scaring a lot of horses. So he could
Mm,
come to power in 2029 and he simply wouldn't have the consensus. You've got Badenoch saying, I will lead by consensus. And that just basically means leaning into whatever this rabble of a party thinks and
yeah.
compromising. Well, no, that's not how
Mm,
you do it. You lead by defining your ideas and then you build the consensus for your own ideas. But that's not something you can do with the Tory party as it currently exists. You've got to rebuild the branch structure. You've got to give power to the branches over selection of candidates. And this is a
mm,
slow renewal process, but you at the same time need to discourage the Lib Dem, Liberal, One Nation, Tory wet types,
mm,
and where possible, exclude them from the inner circle. And just go, if that's how you want to be, you'll be sitting on the back benches for the rest of your political career, and strongly recommend you quietly resign at the next election. Um,
yeah.
Let Labour scrape through, but then spend the whole time building up momentum, promoting the ideas.
Mm,
We've got
yeah.
into a very toxic habit in the Tory party of sacking a leader if they lose an election. That's been the norm
Mm,
ever since Thatcher. But what you actually want is a leader who is going to take their time over it and build in the same way that small
yeah.
parties do.
Mm,
SDP is, 4 or 5 years ago, was practically non-existent, and now
mm,
there's a real momentum to it. There's a recognized online brand. They're putting up candidates. They're doing things, and
yeah.
on their 10-year anniversary, they will be knocking on the door of winning their first MP.
Hmm. And you know what? Like, we can even think about it in terms of football, because people love football, right? So even if there is a bigger, like, smaller clubs need to get time and have a manager for long stay, 10, 15 years, to build a philosophy, and so they can finally win or get promoted. But even bigger clubs need that, right? So there's a lot of bigger clubs like Chelsea. They will keep on firing their manager because they haven't won the Premier League or Champions League, whatever, and they'll come to a point which they are now, which they'll be in a bad state because they don't have stability. Or you can do what Liverpool did, was like, that's a big club, like, we can say, like, oh yeah, Tory is a big party and stuff. That was a big club. They said, okay, we'll get a manager. It doesn't matter if he wins in 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year. It's about he'll rebuild it. That's what Klopp did at Liverpool. And then they eventually became the club, became the club that they are today, right? That's sort of like, that analogy used within politics, that's sort of like what you need within the Conservative Party. You don't need them to
Yeah,
win the next elections or next elections.
you need to
Someone to
build.
build it long term.
Yeah, actually need to build a party within a party. And I think on
Hmm,
that basis, it would be better if Genric did lose this time around, let Badenoch make a total cock up of it, and then
hmm,
be built using the next 4 years to build his own replacement movement.
hmm,
Because what over at Reform, they believe the job is to get so many people elected and then peel off the right of the party to become a party of government. Uh,
hmm.
Now, that's been Farage's pet theory for more than 20 years now, but it's just not going to happen. It's not possible because, as I keep saying, there is no intellectual definition
mm,
to reform. So, if there is going to be a movement, and there's never been a successful political movement without an intellectual foundation, then it's going to be
yeah,
Jenrick that leads it. So
mm,
it's going to be the Tory party that
yeah,
eventually reinvents and takes control. And what I
mm,
think is the most likely scenario, if Jenrick manages to lose this leadership contest, Badenoch goes on to lose in 2029. He then takes over, rebuilds the party, and then, just as the Conservative Party is the Conservative and Union Party,
mm,
you could have a Conservative and Reform Party, which was
yeah,
a formal alliance, but one that was run on a confidence and supply basis, where the
mm,
Reform component would say, we put it in the Constitution that we reserve the right to abstain on any votes if we feel
mm,
we're being sold down the river. So in the past we've had tacit agreements between the Brexit Party and the Tories, but I think a sort of formal deal uh, is on the cards in the future. Oh, and then you get
mm,
Jenrick just basically telling all the One Nation lot to piss off to the Lib Dems where they belong.
yeah, yeah. But I also don't think so. Like that is going to happen till Farage is gone from the Reform Party.
Yeah,
Because I mean, nothing constructive is going to happen. And the thing as well is he's very short termism in this respect, because he's not getting any younger. He wants what he wants. Like, maybe he wants to, pay rich into House of Lords. I don't know what he wants, but I think so. Like, there's enough people around Reform Party that can turn it into something useful, something that we would like to see and actually move towards an intellectual base. Ben
I
Habib
don't
being
think
one
so.
of those people.
It's not going to
But
happen.
they won't unless he's gone. Unless he goes. I
Not
don't think so
even
it's gonna
then.
happen.
Not even then,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
Zia Yusuf is being groomed for Farage's replacement, and
Yeah. Yeah.
he's a very secretive man.
Hmm.
There's a lot in the public domain, but we know very little about who he is, what motivates him, uh, what his passion is, or whether he does have passion. I listened to his
Hmm.
party address at the conference, and it was just the standard right wing bingo caller of "isn't woke terrible, isn't immigration terrible, we should fix this, we should fix that."
Hmm.
There's no vision, no policies, no solutions,
Yeah.
nothing that inspired me to say, "Christ, this is the man. This is the man that's going to lead us and take us back."
Hmm.
Now, I don't get that impression of him.
Hmm.
So, and he's actually he's a charisma vacuum. I don't think he's much more charismatic
Yeah.
than Keir Starmer, and I don't. And as
No.
much as we've heard, they've the party has been repeating ever since I put it about that it was an amateur party.
Hmm.
They've been putting about that. Oh, we're professionalizing. Well, there's no evidence of
Hmm.
that. They are certainly
No. No.
bureaucratizing new branches, but there's no.
Yeah. They have a TikTok game, but it's not as if like,
Yeah,
they have a marketing game, which is good.
it's
They
their
have all of
parliamentary
that going
operation.
on, but yeah,
It's
exactly.
the it's
And
the
that's the thing.
parliamentary
Like in
operation at the
Reform
top.
Party, yeah, and I think so. In Reform Party, I don't see anyone, like really connecting with people apart from Ben Habib. I think so. He really connects with people in a way that others are
Well, he's out of
unable
the tent
to.
now.
Right?
I've always said
Exactly.
there's only
Yeah.
two ways into Farage's gang. You either get your checkbook out or you get elected
Hmm.
to the gang. But if you're
Yeah.
out of favour, then you're out of the tent completely. And
Hmm.
I've seen this before, and I think Ben's starting up his own News at Ben podcast or something like that. So
Yeah.
I think he's going to
Yeah.
be a sort of niche YouTuber voice on the right,
Hmm.
possibly sort of akin with Katie Hopkins or something like it, not directly
Yeah.
comparable, but in terms of the space
Yeah.
they occupy.
Yeah.
And so he will be a much revered, hugely
But it's a
popular
shame though.
figure, but he's not going to actually
Yeah.
have any direct influence over the party.
But that's the thing. Like that's why I think so. Like people like him, like obviously people like him are also waiting. Like right, if Genrick in the future comes about in the leadership and stuff, he would need people like him from different areas to come into the Tory party and make it like more palatable again and make it more connected again. And because it's sad to lose people like that from who are genuine, who actually care
Mm.
about the people, and it comes across that he cares about the people. It's very less people who come into politics who are genuine like that. So it's very sad to lose someone like that from the mainstream part of politics. And it doesn't seem like he's still flying the flag of Reform Party, but it doesn't seem like that they want
They
him
don't have his
involved. It
back.
seems like they've told him, okay, build your brand. Yeah, it feels like they're telling him, build your brand and you'll win in 2029, and then you can that sort of a thing. Like, but it's sort of like, I feel it's disrespectful towards him.
Yes,
A
absolutely.
lot of people have voted for Reform because of him as well. A lot of people actually came towards Reform Party again because of him. um, but that's not recognized enough, because he has the intellectual base to actually do what he wants to do. But yeah, I mean, in the future, maybe like Tory party, when it actually reforms itself, that's a part that it can play. But as far as I can see, like every single party on the political right, every single one of them have some sort of problem, right? Some sort of baggage, some sort of personality problem, some sort of thing, small or big. Even Homeland Party, like, yeah, it was promising, but people that it involves with them as well, you just from the get-go you're making yourself unpalatable to the actual conservatives who are the Tory voters, right? Because that's the people that you want to get. I don't think so. I personally don't think that there's any point in supporting any political party right now. What
Yeah,
would be
I
good is
agree.
to build an intellectual base,
Yeah,
build an intellectual base, build a forum of some sort, where where you don't just build policies and stuff, but you actually start. So this is my idea, like, we start something, that we start educating the people, right? So the reason why we have all these incompetent politicians, the reason why we have this impartial blob within civil service and local government that is ruling over us, essentially unelected, is because the public has become unaware of how they are being governed. They
yeah,
are they are less educated as they used to be. So there need to be a program not to just reawaken the people culturally, but actually educate the people. Right, educate the people on how their laws work, educate the people on how the system works, and how the taxation works, how every single part of the law works, right? That combined with the policy, right? Because then they will have the capacity and the capability to understand the policies that a think tank like that would be proposing. So then
yeah,
the public will have interest in that policy, right? Because right now what they do is they make the policy so complicated, and they hidden within it, like the French philosophers used to do, just make things so complicated that you can't even understand, and that means, oh, it's a good policy. It's not, if you can't explain it properly. But but we have a people who don't. It's not as if like they don't have any interest. And it's not as if they're stupid as well. The public is not stupid, I wouldn't say. It's just that they have been taught to be stupid for a very long time, to be indifferent to how they're governed. And that's the education, I think so, that needs to come back. And once the public is armed with it, then you will get politicians out of those sort of groups. And then you will have a public that will won't just demand, oh, we get out of ECHR, or oh, just stop all immigration, but that demands a proper policy, right? That says, no, 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 you saying bullshit. You're just saying those things. You're just saying like you anti-woke and stuff, but you're not understanding what the actual, like, we want this policy because it will affect that policy, and then it will affect that policy, and that's how we will be governed. I think so. That's something that, some investor needs to invest in, or the public needs to take interest in. You know.
Yeah, you're not wrong. But a lot of politics, you're always going to get a large swathe of voters who are not going to pay any serious attention to politics. Because there's a mindset that stems from the Chartists, when there was part of the Chartist agenda was to have paid MPs, and you don't want to. If you're busy in your life, you don't want to absorb too much of your time on politics. So there's a huge working class attitude that says, I don't do politics, that's what I pay my politicians to do. And there's a certain level of
Mm,
trust that your delegate politician is working on your behalf. That's why you elect them. And what's been
mm,
lost is any sense of scrutiny that MPs actually are working on behalf of voters. And that's certainly the case with the Labour Party, which has never been more nepotistic. There are very few people in the Labour Party that have run their own business. Very few on the front bench who've ever had a real job. And the way
mm,
to become a Labour MP is to be related to an existing MP or a policy wonk, to do an internship at one of the lefty think tanks, go to Oxford, get your
mm,
PPE degree, philosophy,
mm,
politics, and yada, and then get on the selection board of the local Labour Party, and you're essentially gifted, groomed for
mm,
a seat in Parliament. That's why I detested Jo Cox. Incidentally, she was,
mm,
typical well-groomed head girl who
mm,
worked in the NGocracy, and then had close connections with the Reeves family, and then selected on an
mm.
all-women's shortlist. So the underlying assumption that the Labour Party represents and works in the interest of the working class has not been true for 30 years or more. Um,
Mm.
and so there's been a gradual realization of this, particularly that came to the fore during Brexit. And this is why we're seeing a Labour government. People seem to forget that Labour was not elected in its own right. Only 1 in 5 voters, only 1 in 5 of the people who actually bothered to vote, voted for Labour. So this is a party with a mile-wide majority, but it's only an inch deep. So this is not a
Mm.
party that has a mandate. And what we're going to see is more disengagement from politics as people
Yeah,
realise that the system no longer works for them. And I
yeah.
think,
I mean, they don't have a mandate. They just like people are blackpilled, and people are like disengaged, like you're saying. Like that's not a reason to say, "Oh, Labour Party might not even exist within 10 years." If that's something that they are depending on, the people just being blackpilled. All people are waiting for is something with a vision, right? Something
yeah,
with an actual vision, achievable vision, not just like even Reform Party has were not able to get people out of their houses and actually vote, right? It's
yeah.
not as if like people just sense the fakeness of their vision.
Well, I don't know if you saw the Election Maps Twitter account, but they did an aggregate result of the 105 council by-elections since the general election. And
Hmm.
Reform is polling at just one council seat. So,
Yeah,
the message is not
all
getting
of them.
through.
Yeah, I
And
think the conservatives are gaining more.
yeah, Conservatives have actually increased
Yeah.
their following, and that's still
Hmm.
under Sunak. So
Yeah.
there's still a low level reluctance to abandon the traditional parties, and it's clear that
Hmm.
reform has. I always said there was an inherent ceiling that goes with. Um, this sort of sloganeering populism. And I think Reform have reached it, for however well they
mm,
did. I don't think they got more votes than UKIP did in 2015. It's just an
mm,
accident of arithmetic that they ended up with
mm.
5 MPs.
Yeah.
So they're not growing. They might have media momentum, and they might sweep the
Mm,
boards on TikTok and
yeah.
get all the impressive social media statistics in. But we forget that the reach of social media is not what we believe it is. A lot of
Hmm.
people have just wandered off from Facebook.
Yeah.
Engagement
Especially
levels on
conservative
Facebook have
voters.
collapsed.
The core conservative voters, they're not on social media. They don't actually, like, a lot of people that I know who are Tory voters and who are like have been Tory voters for a very long time, generations and stuff. They don't even know what's the current event that's going on, like what's the current thing that's going on social media,
Mm,
because they zoned out a long time ago from social media. Because these are people who actually have families. They're
yeah,
not like single activists and stuff like that. They have families and they have jobs and they have things like that. They are more concerned about those things, about creating a legacy or whatever, and trying
yeah,
to achieve more in their life. They're not concerned about the current affairs. And a lot of these TikTok whatever things that they're doing, a lot of them get American audience anyways, who
yeah.
doesn't matter whether they vote for or
Or
not,
a very
right?
young
So
audience who is actually too young to
yeah,
vote.
exactly.
And it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if Nigel Farage is an absolute lord with 14 and 15-year-olds, because what
Hmm.
matters is how those 14 and 15-year-olds vote in 2029. And they're not necessarily going to
Yeah.
be taken in by Farage when they're actual adults. And I've always
Hmm.
found that Farage's appeal is, I don't want to sound snobby, but he does.
Hmm.
It's the sort of low IQ end of boomerism.
Hmm.
Who people who are taken in by his slogans, who repeatedly
Yeah.
tell me it's like, oh well, we don't need policy, and it's early days, and they're a young party making excuses for the fact that a party that
Yeah.
fancies itself as a serious party of government still hasn't got any policies to speak of.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like people just this is the reason why I'm saying like that people need to be re-educated, right? Like a majority of them still won't be, but the majority of the people who are actually active in voting, the actual electorate, who bother enough to go and vote, right? You need to educate them on what you're actually looking for, right? How you're being governed, why policies matter, how which policy is connected to which policy. And it doesn't have to be all about politics. It's just about like trying to help them be as successful as they can in their personal life, right? Have
Mm.
less losers in the society, because that means that you have an active participation and reason for participation in the society, because what happens to the society happens to you and your aspirations, right? So we need to build those aspirations back into the society, then they will have to take interest in politics, right? um
Well, it's also about
eh,
objective,
eh, hmm,
because you listen to uh, reform, and there's a certain amount of Tories, and they rail against net zero. Now, net
hmm,
zero as a concept, most people don't give a toss about because they don't really understand what it is
hmm,
or what it's costing them. But
yeah,
they do understand objectives such as affordable heating for pensioners, and they might not get
hmm,
animated about net zero, but they do get animated
yeah,
when you pull the winter fuel allowance. And so you need to
yeah,
be weaving in your objectives into your platform and saying, my objective is to control immigration and to
hmm,
get energy as cheap as it possibly can be,
hmm,
and to get your bills down, and to have
yeah,
workable, coherent policies to deliver that. Um, but to be talking about the fringe concepts that
hmm,
people don't connect with, you're talking to yourself. And I find
yeah,
this with I'm in touch with a lot of people who are very much anti net zero, but net zero is still seen as a sort of fringe niche concern that isn't central to
hmm,
politics. Whereas if you actually look at what's going wrong in the economy, it's a collapsing economy because of net zero, because we've
Yeah.
deindustrialized,
Yeah.
because we've ramped up the price of energy, because we've built windmills instead of power stations. This is why the
Mm.
economy is quietly dying, and in conjunction with mass immigration, you've got two forces of nature that are going to collide sometime in the not too distant future, and it's going to make the streets less safe. It's going to make us a dangerous, less trusting country where everything's really expensive, and ordinary families think twice about heating their homes. That's
Yeah.
the negative vision. So you then need to say,
Yeah.
we've got the antidote, we've got the solutions, we've
Mhm.
got the ideas, and it needs to be more than just slogans.
Yeah, and this is what annoyed me about when this whole thing came up about winter allowance and stuff, that no reform party person or no prominent politician went like, well, why do we need winter fuel allowance in the first
Exactly.
place? Because that's what you have to go to the straight away. You have to go to that. Why do we need that? It's because of this net zero, of because of whatever reason, because we're not building nuclear, whatever reason might be, right? It's like the main objective should not be to keep on giving people allowances, is to
Mm,
make sure that nobody needs allowances. That's
yes,
how
I
you
mean,
become successful.
the whole winter fuel allowance is basically a bailout to deal with the consequences of a failed energy policy. And this is a consequence of
Mm,
30 years of policy neglect in energy.
yeah, exactly. And so let's come on to the topic of immigration, right? Because we've touched about immigration a lot,
Mm,
but it seems like people are still not getting it, right? So people are very emotional about a lot of things, but especially about immigration. So people either go around like become very hostile towards the idea of an immigrant, or they become too sympathetic towards immigrant that they are even gonna welcome criminals, right?
yeah.
So they're going on extreme. They're not understanding why there's an issue about it, why it's not a fundamental right for anyone to just walk up to a country and expect it to pay its way,
Mm,
right? And why like borders matter and stuff like that. So but I also think like, as I've seen within the discourse on certain areas of the political right, that they're making it about not the policies of immigration, not the cultural and value cohesion within a nation, national identity cohesion and stuff. They're making it very much an ethnic base sort of a thing. And I think so that is right as well. There's truth within it, that you have to have an ethnic cohesion as well, or a majority of ethnic cohesion as
yes.
well.
Mm,
But when it's coming in the package with people putting up memes of showing disgust against mixed race people, right? Or like, people in a mixed race relationship and stuff, and they're showing disgust against it, right? So now you're entering into a different realm then, because
yeah.
you're mixing disgust with an ethnicity. This is not going to end well, and this is not something that even the majority is going to support anyways.
I haven't seen that much of that, to be honest. I've seen
Hmm.
it creeping in, but I think it's very much a product of American politics. And there's
Yeah.
a ethno nationalist movement on the right of American politics that is
Hmm.
profoundly anti Semitic. And yeah, it is
Yeah.
knocking on the door of Nazi ideology.
Hmm.
And thankfully, we don't have too much of it here. I think if you're getting pushbacks on sort of mixed relationships, it's because of television adverts, and you see this
Yeah.
where they're broadcasting a false reality to us, and
Hmm. Yeah.
you don't have to be.
Hmm.
Do you know who I mean when I say Alf Garnett?
No. No.
Right. Well, that's um, something missing from your cultural education. Write it down. Find out who Alf Garnett is. He was late 70s, early 80s. He was a figure of ridicule on, I think, two separate sitcoms as a sort of balding
Mm.
West Ham supporting bigot who was uh, overtly racist
Oh
to people.
yeah, oh yeah. Still
Yeah.
that to a spot. Okay, yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you don't have to be him to sort of say,
Mm.
hang on, there's a lot of blacks on television, and this does not
Yeah.
this the reality
Mm.
that they're broadcasting through, be it ITV dramas, soap operas, adverts. There's this air of unreality. And this is what the multiculturalists are pushing through to us, this sort of rainbow
Mm.
multicultural society that they believe
Yeah.
that we are and we can be, but we aren't and never
Mm.
going to be. You don't get that level of interaction and intermingling outside of
Yeah.
the workplace. And even
Mm.
in the workplace, it doesn't really happen.
Mm.
And then you see it's almost forced on you everywhere, and
Yeah.
because of Black Lives Matter, it's
Mm.
incredibly black centric, which, as much as
Yeah.
anything, completely alienates the north of England, because
Yeah.
there aren't large that I know of.
Yeah.
I grew up in
Mm.
Bradford. It was an Asian city,
Mm.
Indians
Mm.
and Pakistanis and some Bangladeshis. Seeing a West Indian was a rarity. They were mainly over at Leeds and
Mm.
one very specific part of Leeds. And so
Mm.
there's, as much as it is an unreality, it's a very London centric one that
Yeah.
focuses on Windrush and
Mm.
the West Indian black culture in
Mm.
London. But actually, even that is now a minority of black culture in London. So who are they
Yeah.
speaking for and who are they speaking
Yeah.
to? And so you're
Yeah.
getting a gradual pushback. But I thankfully think the any ideas about being anti intermarriage, interracial
Mm.
marriages, I think the British public will push back on that, and rightly so,
Yeah.
because you've got the Steve Laws end of things, where if you're remotely brown, you're not one of us. But I do think
Mm.
that you can marry into
Yeah.
being British, and
Yeah.
I do think you have to respect people's choices and respect the institution of marriage. If you're bringing someone here
Yeah.
as a partner to bring up children, then
Mm.
that's a contribution in itself. That's a
Yeah.
different matter to bringing in entire families of foreign cultured people.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Yeah.
um,
Because that, so that's the thing. Like, there's so much nuanced conversations within it, right? This is why I dislike people taking it to that extreme, that, oh, if you're even slightly brown or something like that, you just don't belong here and you should be deported. And then, like, somehow you're subhuman or something, because I see that it is the American influence that you pointed out, which, but it bleeds through within social media. And it's sort of like it defeats the purpose. Like, okay, do you want people to assimilate, or do you not want to assimilate, or do you just want to tell people no matter what they won't be accepted, right? So
ah, now
that's not helpful.
Now, this is an interesting question, because I have been saying, the issue is assimilation or integration,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I've relied on that narrative for a lot of years when talking about immigration. But
Hmm.
it was put to me, what are they actually? Are they pick someone who is integrated? Are they actually integrated
Hmm.
into British culture, or have Britons been so completely robbed of their own culture to the point that where this neoliberal consumerist grazing strip, where we have become unintegrated from our own culture and our own society, and we're just individuals going about our separate business.
Hmm.
And then you have westernized immigrants who are also going about their separate business.
Hmm.
Does that qualify as integration? Um,
No, that doesn't. And then you see
yeah,
that a lot on the left, actually. Ethnic minorities on the left, they have integrated actually into a British culture, which is anti-British, right? And for
yes.
them, that's
In
integration, but that's
politicians.
not really integration. Yeah,
Yeah, and people have been
exactly.
telling me, oh, well, the Sikhs are integrated. Are they? If they're
Yeah, if they're gonna
maintaining,
be separate from, yeah.
yeah, if they're maintaining an Indian language, an Indian religion, an Indian
Hmm,
culture, and Indian headdress, all right.
hmm,
So they join the British Army, fine.
hmm,
But then so the Gurkhas, but they're not British,
yeah,
and we don't want them here. The whole point of getting the Gurkhas into the British Army was that you train up an officer class who go back with their forces pensions, and they become the middle class, and that's a means of civilizing a developing country, developing a ruling
hmm,
class of ex-army.
hmm,
um, so these are foreign policy tools at our disposal that we've
hmm,
always used, and
yeah,
so we can. Uh, the question of integration. This is one of the reasons. Going back to Kemi Badenoch, she wrote in the Times the
yeah,
other day, "We need an integration strategy, a plan." Well, we all agree with that. We all know that.
yeah,
But she didn't come forth with any details. And this is what, when I
yeah,
wrote my immigration chapter in the manifesto, I actually said, we need an immigration chapter, and here are some of the policies. But they
hmm,
would necessarily have to be quite aggressive and authoritarian to
hmm,
repair the
hmm,
damage of 30 years of
yeah,
multiculturalism.
yeah.
And so this is
And
where this is where
one thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, this is where there's a dispute between ethno nationalists and civic nationalists, where the ethno
Hmm,
nationalists are saying the civic nationalists are too soft. But you look at the party that supposedly is civic nationalist, i.e., Reform,
hmm,
but it's not willing to do any of the robust integrationist policies that would be
hmm,
controversial.
yeah,
Therefore, it is not civic nationalist, it's just another multiculturalist Tory party 2.0
yeah,
that's going to stop short.
yeah,
And so my argument is that an effective civic nationalist party with integrationist policies would look 95% similar to a coherent ethno nationalist party, because it is one that is
hmm,
necessarily going to um, crack down on sectarianism, and it's going to
yeah,
shutter illegal extremist mosques. It's going to go
hmm,
into sort of separatist enclaves, break them up, move them out. If you're in social housing, then you're going
yeah,
to actually enforce the diversity that you say strengthens people.
hmm,
This is quite unorthodox for a live broadcast, but you're going to have to excuse me for 2 minutes while I
yeah,
tell you.
yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll just wait for Pete for 2 minutes while he comes back. So yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Like, I was actually talking, had an episode out on my podcast as well about like maintaining national identity and the reasons between the differences between civic nationalism and ethno nationalism. Actually, we don't need to go to extremes of both these ends. Go to the extreme of civic nationalism where you'd actually end up having no majority ethnic representation of your nation. That means you're just divorced from the idea of whatever of that nation is supposed to be. And especially for an old nation like England, it is important for there to be a majority ethnic population, at least 90-95% of the ethnicity should be of that of that nation. But at the other end, you don't it doesn't in the older countries, civic nationalism like America doesn't work, because it's not England wasn't made out of an idea. England has always been England, in that sense that it was developed within ethnicity. So you do need a majority ethnicity, and that's why completely going on civic nationalism doesn't work.
Mm.
But what the problem that I see as well is, like, when people also talk about integration policies, it's like you're talking about like you first have to close the tap before you deal with the bath water, right? Because
Yes.
the tap is still open, right? So, and you also have to think which are the people already over here that need to be deported no matter what. One of them would be the illegal immigrants. They don't have enough respect for your country to begin with, because they're
Mm.
lying, and they're coming in. They need to be deported first of all anyways. Then you need to develop a system of understanding, of re-understanding, which the society has seemed to have forgotten, and the governance of society seem to have forgotten, about differentiating between your friends and your foes. We
Mm.
don't understand, we don't differentiate anymore between the friend and the foes. We so trapped within our liberal framework that we cannot understand who is a foe. If there's an it doesn't matter if there's a third generation or fourth generation person, if they're talking about sharia law and wanting to implement sharia law, that person should be deported. That person should have their citizenship revoked, and they should be deported. If not, if you can't deport them, there's plenty of places in the sea. I don't care, right? They cannot stay here because they mean you harm. So now, when there's an ideology that has been developed in your country for a very long time, and seeped into universities and stuff, aka Marxism, that needs to be dealt with. Because what do you think is the end point of such a philosophy, right? Of such a political philosophy? It means to change you, it means to restructure you, right? It means to destroy everything that you have been, and it's doing that. What do you think is going to happen just by mollycoddling them? You
Mm.
can't, you know, because we have forgotten how to differentiate between friends and foes, and how to deal with them. Every nation has the right to forcibly to use force to deal with its enemies
Absolutely. Yeah.
within its borders, at least, and we should not be restricted by some arbitrary international whatever laws to be able to do that, right? Any Middle Eastern country, if you pick it out, they will deal very aggressively with anyone they think it's harming their national identity. Yeah, Saudi Arabia does that, Middle East does that. They just pick those people up and they just deport them. If not, they put them in prison, or they actually give them death sentences, right? They deal with them because you
Well,
have to.
for me, people often say you got to differentiate between moderate Islam and extreme Islam. But what we
I don't think
don't
so.
see, what we don't
Hmm.
see among supposed moderate Muslims, we don't see them making it into the political arena.
Yeah.
The Muslim MPs who stand up to speak in the House of Commons, which side are they on? They
Hmm.
represent Gaza. They don't represent their
Yeah.
own constituents. To the
Hmm.
extent that they're not even putting out electoral addresses in the English language. You had Naz Shah
Yeah.
at the general election
Yeah.
giving a face to camera talk in a foreign
Hmm.
language, which meant if I lived in Bradford, I would have no idea what my candidates were saying
Hmm.
because they were speaking
They don't want you to know.
Caucasian
They don't
language.
care.
And
They don't
then
care about you. That's the thing.
you got Saeed Awazi, who
Hmm.
is supposedly the face of
Yeah.
moderate
Go
Islam,
on.
but she's pushing
Hmm.
for the Islamophobia definition. She
Yeah.
is she is an Islamist, soft peddling
Hmm.
extreme Islam. So you never see Muslims making it into the public realm who are actually prepared to denounce Islamism and to pick the same fights we are picking. I can't point to many Muslims who I can
No.
genuinely say are on my side. And I don't say this as someone who is inherently hostile, because
Hmm.
you you look at places like Keithley. These are places that have effectively been colonized by Pakistanis, and
Hmm.
in those communities, there are old churches, nice buildings that have been allowed to fall into disrepair and absolutely black with soot, windows boarded up with cages over the windows to protect the stained glass windows. Some Muslims bought up a church in an area of Keighley. They sandblasted it back to its original Yorkshire stone. They put in new
Hmm.
stained glass windows, albeit with Islamic symbolism.
Hmm.
And they really went to town on restoring this building. And why shouldn't it be the focus of worship in a Muslim community? I don't see that Islam is inherently incompatible if it is forced to anglicize. And if, like churches, they open their doors so that that space can be a playgroup in the morning, uh, social functions in the afternoons, as an integral part of the community, as opposed to an alien indoctrination camp that extremist men turn up to. And that was always the problem with your backstreet mosques. And so I don't want us to get to a position where we're going to say, oh, we're going to ban Islam and deport anyone
But this
who
is
is
Pete,
Muslim.
this is why Islam is incompatible, right? So you can actually not do that in Islam.
Ah,
There are
no,
direct.
there you've just insulted Britain because, you know, Britain has an extraordinary capacity, particularly Bradford. It doesn't matter how
Hmm.
colourful and exotic your ideology or your religion or your culture is. The all
Hmm.
consuming, depressing grey drabness of Bradford will more likely integrate you than the other way around. And I've seen this because you go up the Leeds Road in Bradford, and when the
Hmm.
Muslims first arrived, their shop fronts would be tatty, hand sign written in some
Yeah.
uh, language I don't
Hmm.
understand. Now they've gotten wealthier. Their signs are they might be foreign words, but they are English lettering. They've got westernized
Hmm.
styling. They are anglicized, and so are the posher end of the curry houses in Bradford. They
Yeah.
are highly anglicized, and so there is an integration process, but it's glacial. Now, the problem we have is that whatever progress we were making, when you have yet another surge of mass immigration, you get new people landing from Pakistan, moving into a Pakistani area,
Hmm.
and they're not actually surrounded by anything British. There's nothing British left to integrate with. And that's where you start finding whatever progress you were making is going into reverse. And so I think you need to look very carefully at areas
But
where Muslims have integrated in the sense that they have made a positive contribution to
hmm.
the communities they live in. And I could go to places like
Hmm.
Keighley and say, well, it's better that that old church is being sandblasted, modernized, and repaired
Hmm.
and is used than if it just sat there for another 50 years with its roof caving in to the point, some point. Some developer comes in, bulldozes it completely, and replaces it with a block of
Hmm.
flats or whatever. No, uh, these but this is all to do with the pace of immigration. So this at this point you've got to say, if you want immigration integration to work, you have to have a moratorium on all
Yeah.
settler immigration
Now,
for a
I
generation.
do see. I do see your point, like about the integration of Muslims and stuff like that. But I've seen that within Pakistan as well, right? Within Pakistan, within Karachi, within Lahore and stuff, we had pockets of people who were moderates, right? So a lot of pockets of people who are like more successful, educated, and moderates, stuff like that. I was a part of that family, right? So um, uh, who don't follow Islam to the letter and stuff, who are more anglicized. And this is why I have the love of Britain and stuff, because that was my how I was brought up. But the issue that happens is that you have to be a really bad Muslim to be a good person, to be a good civilized person, right? And you really have to. This is the problem, right? So we can integrate these people no matter how much we want, right? As long as someone remains Muslim, further down within their generation, they will revert to their religion at some point when they're looking for identity. And if
Yeah.
they have been in this sectarian sort of enclaves like in Bradford and stuff like that, they might be out drinking and stuff like that. There's no guarantee that when that person is going to have kids, that that kid is also going to be a moderate, no matter how educated it is. That's why you see people who are doctors, who are engineers, who are PhDs they have, right? They still will commit terrorist acts.
Yeah.
Is because there's a flaw within the religion, right? This is why I
No.
don't think so. Islam has Islam has a fundamental problem where everything that is being said in the religion is not for it's not hypothetical, it's not like it's not a story, it's not metaphorical. It's an actual edict. It's something that Muhammad has told you, that is the word of God, and you have to deliver upon it, right? So when the new wave of Pakistanis came in, these immigrants and stuff, mass immigration, they came in, the people within those communities, their kids and stuff, they refound their identity, right? Because they could identify more with these Pakistanis again, right?
I'm not sure
and
that's
and, and the
true.
moderate, some of them and a lot of the moderate Muslims, that's why, no, there's some truth within it, I think so. Like that's why you saw third and fourth generation of people, kids going to do jihad in other countries.
I'm going
But
to
there's
stop you
also
there.
another
I
one
think
second, yeah. Okay, go ahead, go ahead.
I think what we're seeing is the emergence of a diaspora version of Islam, because you get young men who've been brought up, say, in Bradford, and
Hmm.
they have a residual Pakistani accent, but they predominantly speak English with a strong Yorkshire accent, and they
Hmm.
sound more Yorkshire than I do.
Hmm.
And so they then go back to the home country. Um, they're still perceived in Bradford as Pakistanis, and they're perceived as white by white people as Pakistanis. But they go to Pakistan,
They're
to the
not
back
considered,
doors of
yeah,
God
Pakistani over
knows
there.
where, and they're seen as Westerner, and so they don't
Hmm.
fit. They're too educated, they're too westernized, they're too liberal to ever integrate into Pakistani society. They are not Pakistanis, but by the same token, they are not quite British either. So there's
Hmm.
this uprooted diaspora of predominantly British Muslims who don't belong in either camp. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
they take tenets of each, but they look to Islam to give them a sense of identity. But the ones preaching Islam here are probably more extreme than you would find in
Oh
Muslim
yeah,
countries.
yeah,
Because, as you
yeah,
say, in Muslim countries, they will go and crack down and imprison the
yeah,
extremists,
yeah.
whereas we don't. And so this is where you've got to have your
But
interventionist
even
Muslims.
like, but we also have to see like even their moderates are extreme, right? So even their moderates are extreme or very highly conservative from our point of view. The
Mm,
problem, that what I'm saying is that these people can never fully integrate, or nobody can ever fully assimilate or integrate unless they give up their tribe and join the British tribe fully, right? You can't become British unless you say, no, like my culture, whatever I came with, yeah, I'm bicultural, I have that other culture, but British culture takes precedence, right? And that that also involves intermarriage into Western intermarriages and stuff like that for that person to become that. Islam would not allow it, because Islam does not allow people to get married
Hmm.
with people who are not Muslim. So whoever they become married with, they have to make them Muslim, right? So there is a block over there. The only way that these people, it's not about ethnicity at all. The only way this, it would be foolish for me to make it about ethnicity, as I have Pakistani ethnicity myself. But the only way that it can happen is if they disengage with that tribe. They say, okay, otherwise what's the point of nationhood, right? How can I be Japanese if I'm still British? How can I be British if I'm still Pakistani, right? Obviously when it comes to heated situations, I'll have to choose one over the other. Now if I am in positions of power, in politics, in civil service, in local government and stuff like that, and I still have this, I'm living with this contradiction, right? I don't fit in there, I don't fit in here, because I have not said no to either one. I'm trying to play, it's like I have two wives, right? I will have to favor one over the other in situations. So
But throwing a
I don't see
curveball,
assimilation happening. Sorry?
throwing a curveball in there is
Yep.
that you have uh, an increasing, especially with younger generations, who are uh, they are more imbued with internet culture, and most of
Hmm.
their social life is not connected to any sense of place. And
Hmm.
it's only in later life where you start feeling like you need that sense of place, a sense of
Yeah.
community. But for the
Hmm.
internet generation, me particularly, I live in a North Yorkshire village. I don't go to the local pub because it's a sort of flat top roof kind of
Hmm.
clientele. I don't really relate to the people on there. My social
Hmm.
life is on the internet. My intellectual life is on the internet. My culture, my humor is shaped by my little corner
Hmm.
of the internet.
Yeah.
So um, there's this dysfunction in modernity
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
any sense of place and identity, not least because the cornerstone of community used to be the pub. Now, a lot of political analysts on the conservative right are saying we're seeing a collapse of community because we have attacked the places of congregation, the pubs. But
Hmm.
actually, pubs are dying in
Yeah.
their own right because people are making
Hmm.
different choices. They choose
Yeah.
either to drink at home and just to chat with their
Hmm.
friends over FaceTime, as we're doing now, or they would rather have a cup of coffee because people are waking up to the health risks of
Yeah.
alcohol. I mean, Britain has an absolutely terrible
Yeah.
relationship with alcohol. You go into
Hmm.
Witherspoons, and
Hmm.
these are the sort of last gasps of what would have been the working men's clubs,
Hmm.
and they are out of peak hours. They tend to be full of men of a particular age, slightly older than me, who
Hmm.
will at least 2 days a week drink more than 6 or 7 pints of beer. And you can
Yeah.
see it in their complexion, you can see it in their physique that beer, alcohol, is killing them. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
and while we have public health policies that actually say, drink with moderation, drink with a meal. This is why we have the pubs that are thriving, the gastro pubs that do decent food, where
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
have 2 or 3
Hmm.
pints and socialise. But
Hmm.
a lot of the old school pubs that are there for exclusively drinking are for a clientele that have set about destroying themselves with alcohol. And so, yeah, we have
Hmm.
come down quite hard on that. And so, the traditional model of the pub, of course, was attached to the traditional model of employment, where you lived
Hmm.
in, say, a mining village or a steel town, where you would go to work with the same
Hmm.
people, and you would go and hang out with them in the pub afterwards, and then you'd go home. And those were the
Yeah.
places of congregation. But if you destroy the centres of employment, and we're all working from home or in white collar jobs now.
mm,
The traditional mode of pub evaporates. So the foundation upon which our society and culture was based has gradually died off over the last 30 years, and it continues to die off
mm,
and transmogrify. Then the internet throws in this curveball of the onlineification of people's social lives.
mm,
It's very difficult to pin down what British culture is. And,
mm,
we see this question posed quite often. Some people would go as far as saying, oh, the British don't have a culture, where, of course, we absolutely do. It's one of those things it's
mm,
difficult to define, but you know it when you see it.
yeah,
But it's not as obvious. It's less tangible than it ever was. And because we are more individualistic as a society through having material wealth, collectivism tends to be when there's scarcity and managing resources to ensure that everybody gets their piece of the pie. But when
mm,
everybody independently can get their own piece of the pie, there is less need for that social cooperation. And this is the disparity you see between Muslim communities and white communities. There is still a sense of cohesion because there's in Muslims, because there's still that need to cooperate to further their interests and
yeah,
uh,
their interest, yeah,
their wealth, of course.
yeah,
Because they've become considerably richer over the last 40
mm,
years through family connections, starting businesses.
yeah,
We don't do that. We go and work for the government for a fixed salary.
mm,
We don't take risks. We go and work for the public sector or a charity or some
mm,
white collar bullshit banking job or
mm,
we so our our culture as it is in modernity is a much more disparate, disconnected, lonelier existence. And
mm,
we're saying, you've got your family and your wider community. Break away from that and integrate into what we are, which is
yeah,
lonely
yeah,
alcoholic bores who spend all day on the internet.
yeah. But no, this is the thing, this is what I was getting at before as well, that you can't have an integration policy if you don't know what to integrate into in the first place. And also when you're not taking care of, like, when you're not closing that tap as well, or people coming in. And for a very long time, like, what, like, people think, okay, the English culture is going down because the pubs are closing down and stuff. Like, people, not everyone used to drink as well. People used to go to other places as well. It's not just the pubs, it's the churches as well, it's the other
Yeah,
places
but
of
we don't go to
congregation
church
as well.
anymore. Yeah.
Yeah,
So we've
exactly.
binned
But it's
Christianity.
because
Well, that,
people, yeah,
uh,
but
and then you've got your
because I
traditionalist
think so.
you've got your
Go on.
traditionalists saying, "Oh, we need to," because there's this dispute between ethno-nationalism and civic nationalism, and then what we're
Mm.
starting to see creeping into UKIP and Britain First
Christian
is
nationalism,
the
yeah.
need to revive Christian nationalism, and
Mm.
they are saying, the faith underpins the community, and they're learning from Muslim communities, saying, we're doomed if we don't rebuild Christianity. Now,
Mm.
they might be right about that, but the thing
Mm.
is, this idea that we're all going to suddenly wake up one day and go, oh, actually, our grandparents are right. We need to go back to church on Sunday and
No,
start reading the Bible. Categorically not going to happen. So if you're at all
no.
serious and you're thinking about these problems, you got to think
Mm.
about, what does post-Christianity secular society look like? What do its institutions look like? What informs the morality of them? And as I
Mm.
said earlier, if we're dispensing with archaic Christian-inspired structures, because even the
Mm.
Church of England has given up on Christianity. It's all this happy clappy
A long
wokey
time
stuff
ago.
now. So if the church has given up on Christianity and the people have given up on Christianity, and we're gradually moving to a more egalitarian means of governing ourselves, then yeah, we do need to think about binning the Commonwealth, binning the monarchy, and beyond that, Is Britain then an open borders neoliberal grazing strip, or do we define Britain as something else? A post-Christianity, post-monarchy Britain is a new country. So what's the basis of that new country? What are the rules it operates by? Who does it
Mm.
include, and who does it exclude? And I
Yeah.
think we can agree on who and what it should exclude: radical Islam,
Yeah.
banning the burqa,
Yeah.
but at the same time, um, we we're a lost people, and you can't expect people
Yeah.
to integrate into a lost.
Well, and this is why I titled it "Lost at Sea," right? Because everyone seems to be lost at sea. And the thing is, like for me, I think so. Like they could be a sort of Christian revival, in different pockets and stuff, which which informs people, like sort of reconnects them in some way. It might not be like in complete practice way and stuff like that, but it could be like it still connects them. Okay, this is your past and whatever it might be. But the main point is for me is to recreate a natural affinity that people used to have with each other. It wasn't because people weren't going to the pubs because primarily just because for drinking. They weren't going to the churches just because of drinking. They weren't going to the garden centers just because they like gardening and stuff like that. It's I think so it's because people had a natural affinity to each other, and they trusted each other. There was a high it built into a high trust society. You could go on your own anywhere, and you could have a good time, right? Like even before in the pubs, it used to be you could go on your own in the pub, and you would find people to talk with and like have a pint with and whatever stuff like that. So but that is eroded because of many different factors of and huge factor is immigration, because we have included so many people
Mm,
whom we don't have a natural affinity, right? Whom we cannot trust, who do not speak our language, who do not act in our way, who do not understand the customs, right?
mm.
Who we cannot trust with our kids, who we cannot trust around our wives, right?
You,
And stuff like these things matter.
you've picked up an
I
interesting
think
point
that's
there.
eroded.
Who do you
Mm.
trust with your kids?
Yeah.
Well, if you want to rebuild a high trust society, we've got to
Mm.
undo a lot of the paranoia that came from 1997 onwards, where instead of it used, if you wanted to go out on a Saturday night, you would get the neighbours' kids to babysit your kids. But now, no, you've got to have a
Mm.
registered babysitter, a registered nursery, and
Yeah.
we've professionalised child rearing so mothers can go to
Yeah.
work. And that is a huge financial drain, not just on the state, but on families themselves. Um, and we used
And
to have,
it erodes that
it,
natural affinity as well, right?
yeah,
Because like
informal.
now carers are like now like your neighbor taking care of your grandma is not like he has to be a registered carer or someone,
Yeah,
right? He has to be unpaid carer, like it's yeah, those relationships.
but then we also used to have voluntary play groups that were run by the mothers
Mm, mm,
themselves in church halls. But of course,
yeah.
we've closed down the church halls, sold off the community halls. The only thing, the only residual thing left are these what's left in the old libraries, which seem to do anything but stock books these days. So all of
Mm,
the places where people can come together and organise voluntarily, we're losing those places. But then at the same time, we've abandoned the structures of a high trust society, but we now find that we are in a low trust society where actually you
mm.
wouldn't want to trust your kids to
No.
say the Cub Scouts. Would you drop your
Mm,
kids off at the Cub Scouts when the Cub Scouts website is waving a progress pride flag and go, hey, if you're a middle-aged bloke and you fancy calling yourself Susan and wearing a
mm.
nice pretty frock, you can come and look after these young boys for 2 hours a week? Yeah, of course. No, you're not.
Yes.
So you're going to have to root liberalism out and woke
Mm,
out. So the task, if you want to, if you want to re, if you want a society people can integrate into, you need to rediscover what was great about our society, which was the fact it was a high trust society. Rebuild the
Hmm.
institutions without Christianity, which of course is hugely difficult, but then persuade people that they should and they must start trusting each other again. But that's
Hmm.
made all the more difficult when you're importing vast armies of low IQ sub-Saharan Africans and
And Asians, yeah,
Pakistani men who feel entitled to
yeah,
snatch young girls and rape them. So how
yeah,
can you have a high trust society then? And then of course
yeah.
there's the way that we have changed. There was a video at Christmas, and it was a guy just walking through his neighbourhood with his camera at the green on his council estate, and he was lamenting that, you know, when I was a kid, Christmas Day, there would be dozens of kids out on this field. They'd be playing with their footballs or the bicycles that they've got for
Hmm.
Christmas, all the outdoor pursuits. But of course, now
Hmm.
kids for Christmas they get Xbox consoles that plug into the
Yeah,
TV. The kids are now not socializing with each other. Uh,
yeah, because it's
in
safer
the
for
outdoors.
parents to monitor them. Yeah,
Yeah, so
it's a low trust society. They can't let them go out and play because someone is gonna snatch them.
yeah, well, when I was a kid, you know, I was given a bicycle for Christmas. I would go for
Hmm.
miles. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
30 miles in every direction. Nobody
Hmm.
knows the hills of West Yorkshire better than me. And so, and we would be out interacting in with real people on a real world basis, and that's just not happening
Hmm.
anymore. Not just because the kids, not just because parents don't think it's safe to let their kids out, but the kids themselves don't want to go out. They want to be plugged into
Yeah.
their Xboxes and their gaming headsets,
Hmm.
and then making friends with people in Canada, Brazil, and God knows
Yeah.
where. Anyone, and talk to literally anyone but the kid who lives next door.
Yeah.
How do you even
Yeah.
begin to fix that? And so until we address the fundamental dysfunctions in our own society, we cannot possibly expect anyone to integrate into it.
This is the huge thing as well, right? If we don't fix ourselves first, we can't expect others who are coming in a not to take advantage of us or would want to be us. Like, because what is us? What is us? Seemingly, like, more and more progressively seems like a very dysfunctional us, right? So if I was like, let's say if I was Japanese, right, and if I wanted to come to Britain, I was like, no, I'm going to maintain my Japaneseness because look at them, what the hell are they doing, right? So, like, yeah, I mean, I think so, you're right, along with like rediscovering or reinventing what is us. Along with that, we do need to understand, differentiate between friend and foe again, and not just on the basis of ethnicity, because there's a lot more ethnic British people who are foes to Britain, right? Who are the ones who have enabled this destruction of Britain?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
if they wouldn't have opened the doors for all of this destruction, it actually wouldn't have happened in the first place. So that needs to be recognized as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, it is. Oh, I think so. My video is gone, but that's also a sign of we have been talking for a while now, and
Yeah.
we should wrap up.
Yeah. I've managed to pinch a nerve in my neck this week, and I've lost the
Yeah.
use of my right arm. So I'm on an
Yeah.
absolute cloud of painkillers, and I do actually need to go lie down for a bit.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I hope you get better, and thank you everyone who was watching. And hopefully, we can get together again and
yeah.
actually start talking about your manifesto, and getting people to actually read it.
Yes, that might be
Um,
fun.
and yeah, and getting people. I want people to get interested in this idea that, let's say, if you and I were to create something, some sort of a think tank and stuff, that people would actually. Oh,
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. I think
yeah,
instead of
yeah.
starting up new political parties, what we could really
Hmm.
do with is a new think tank, because the ones that are based in London are so unbelievably out of touch. We've got policy exchange, and all the ones that connected to Westminster. They're no more in touch than the BBC. They've just completely lost it. So
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to get out any sense out of them. I think what we need is to build up
No.
a network of new think tanks that are based outside of London, who actually live with the
Hmm.
consequences of decisions that London
Yeah.
makes.
And I think so it would be very easy to attract a lot of good people, a lot of
Yeah, the
experts and
right
stuff
people out
into
there.
it. Yeah.
Mm,
And we
yeah.
actually yeah, so I think so, like during this series of us discussing the manifesto as well, I want to encourage people to actually think about it. And if you want to show support and stuff, maybe I'll do a poll, and I'll put it on my Twitter profile, pin it up over there, if people want to, do people want to contribute to something like this or not.
Mm,
We have a lot of people, if they want to contribute, like it's not just about a think tank, it's about re-educating the public as well, about how they're being governed, how they can be better at things, and actually reviving the culture, not through just singing and dancing and stuff like that, but actually through knowledge, and
mm,
sort of reinvigorating the whole nation into wanting to learn things as well as it used to be. Pick up reading, because people have lost this habit of reading as well. There's a lot of things that can be fixed, and people, like you said before as well, people are busy in their lives, right? So it's not as if like we don't have to keep bring people back into the classrooms. If the life has changed, if the culture has changed, or how people are interacting with knowledge has changed, then we have to adapt on how we are giving people the required knowledge. So if we can build something like that, I think so that is the only thing I see saving people, and from it we getting the politicians which we actually need, building policies that will help in the long term, because there's no hope in any of the current political parties, I think so.
indeed.
But yeah, my camera has gone anyways now, so
Right. Hey,
thank you everyone for watching, and hopefully we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks, Pete. See you later.
cheers. See ya. Bye.
Bye.